Hey everyone, we are so excited that you have joined us for our digital gathering. My name is Justin and I'm the middle school minister here at Forum. And over the next hour or so, we are going to have a chance to sing together, we'll listen to God's Word together, and we'll take communion together. And while we are not physically in the same place, we are a big church meeting in small groups, connected by the power of the Holy Spirit. So let me encourage you to create, as best you can, a distraction-free environment and stand with us as we begin.
Who breaks the power of sin and darkness, whose love is mighty and so much stronger, the King of glory, the King above all kings, who shakes the whole earth with holy thunder, who leaves us breathless in awe and wonder, the King of glory, the King above all kings. Oh yeah, this is amazing grace. This is unfailing love, that you would take my place, that you would bear my cross, you laid down your life, that I would be set free. Yeah. Oh, Jesus, I sing for all that you've done for me. Who brings our chaos back into order? Who makes the orphan a son and daughter? The King of glory, the King of glory, who rules the nations with truth and justice, shines like the sun in all of its brilliance. The King of glory, the King above all kings. Oh, yeah, this is amazing grace. This is unfailing love, that you would take my place, that you would bear my cross, you laid down your life, that I would be set free. Yeah. Oh, Jesus, I sing for all that you've done for me. Sing worthy. Worthy is the Lamb who was slain, and worthy is the King who conquered the grave. And worthy is the Lamb who was slain, and worthy is the King who conquered the grave. And worthy is the Lamb who was slain, worthy is the King who conquered the grave. Worthy is the Lamb who was slain. Worthy, worthy, worthy. Oh, this is amazing grace. This is unfailing love, that you would take my place, that you would bear my cross. Oh, you laid down your life, that I would be set free. Yeah. Oh, Jesus, I sing for this is amazing grace. This is unfailing love, that you would take my place,
Man, I'm so excited as always to worship alongside you guys today. You know, this next song we're going to sing is called One Thing Remains. And lately I've been thinking about how important it is in this time, and in all times really, to reevaluate our priorities and what's important. You know, I'm thinking this season that we find ourselves in, we have this incredible opportunity to do just that, to reprioritize our lives around what's important. And lately I've been thinking about really how fragile life is. Not only in these times, but just every day. Our human lives are just fragile, and at the end of the day, there's one thing that remains, one thing that's important, is that's God's love for us and our love back to Him. And that's kind of what this song is about. So as we worship together, let's remember that one thing is always true. We can always count on the fact that God is faithful and that His love will never fail. So let's sing this out together.
That I face, stronger than the power of the grave, constant in the trial and the change. One thing remains: your love never fails, it never gives up, it never runs out on me. Your love never fails, it never gives up, it never runs out on me. Your love never fails, it never gives up, it never runs out on me. And on and on, and on and on and on and on it goes. Oh, it overwhelms and satisfies my soul, and I never ever have to be afraid. 'Cause one thing remains, just one thing remains. Your love never fails, it never gives up, it never runs out on me. Your love never fails, it never gives up, it never runs out on me. Your love never fails, it never gives up, it never runs out on me. Your love in death and in life, in death, in life, I'm confident and covered by the power of your great love. And my debt is paid, and there's nothing that can separate my heart from your great love. Your love never fails, it never gives up, it never runs out on me. Your love never fails, it never gives up, it never runs out on me. Your love never fails, it never gives up, it never runs out on me. Your love. On it goes, and on and on and on and on it goes. For it overwhelms and satisfies my soul, and I never ever have to be afraid. 'Cause one thing remains, just one thing remains. Your love never fails, it never gives up, it never runs out on me. Your love never fails,
so glad you're joining us this morning for our digital service in whatever format or whatever way you are tuning in. We're glad that you're here. If you are new or visiting with us in the digital environment for the very first time, let me introduce myself. My name is Bradley. I'm one of the pastors here at Forum. We are thrilled that you have tuned in today. We're going to finish out a teaching series that we have been in really for the past month. Today is part 5 of this series, and it's been preparing us for Easter. But before we do that, I want to say just two things really quickly. Number one is this, that right now, if you're joining us at 9 o'clock on Sunday morning, you're joining a community of people who are worshiping God together in unison. Though we're far from one another in terms of distance, we are closer than ever spiritually because we're united around who Jesus is. But as I've been talking to people throughout the past couple weeks, there's still such a hunger for community. And so how can we do that digitally? Well, here's what we've got set up. We have uploaded this service to Facebook as of 9 o'clock on Sunday morning. And I am right now recording this on Thursday afternoon. So I am Sunday morning at 9 o'clock sitting on the couch with my wife drinking coffee, and I've got my phone in my hand, and I've got that Facebook page pulled up. So if you want to jump into a little chatting up on Facebook right underneath that video, let me welcome you into that environment. Come and say hi, submit prayer requests. How can we come alongside of you in this really unique time that we're in? So that was number one. And then there's number two. Like if you're in a position right now where things are a little bit more difficult and you're struggling in some way, whether physically, mentally, or spiritually, we have a button on our website at the corner of every single page that just says need help. And if you just click that button, that is going to get you into a pipeline. And we as an entire church, both ministry staff, elders, deacons, missions team, and our volunteer leaders, we are here to help in any way that we can. We may not be able to fulfill every single need that comes in, but we want to be able to do for you what we wish we could do for everybody. And I can promise you this, we'll do our very best to try to meet those needs. And sort of in conjunction with that, as a ministry team here at Forum, not only have we provided the button to let people come to the ministry in a sense and tell us about their needs, but we are also reaching out into the community to try to see where we can help. And so we're partnering with the Red Cross and are going to be hosting a blood drive here at Forum. We're reaching out to our medical community to see how we can provide supplies. So stay tuned to our website and to our Facebook page. Download our mobile app, and that's an easy way to stay connected to all the things that are happening. We're partnering with homeless shelters. We're reaching out to the food bank. We're reaching out to local organizations just to try to provide some way to help. And here's the really cool thing. If you go to our website and you click on the COVID-19 update button, that will take you to a landing page that also will allow you to sign up to help. So maybe you're not in a position that where you need help, but God has blessed you in a way that you could provide help. We would love to partner with you. So this is just our heart as a ministry, trying to make a difference in the midst of all that's happening. And there's so many things going on and things change on a daily basis. And so every single day we're trying to reach out and do things to make a difference. And I want to say specifically to those of you who have been giving generously through this time, thank you. That's allowing us to mobilize so many different people and to connect into our community in a way that we wouldn't be able to do otherwise. So thank you for that. And let's keep reaching people for Jesus regardless of what's going on in our culture and in our world today. We're thankful that you've joined us, and we're gonna finish out today a series that is really specifically looking at the last couple hours of Jesus' life. And so he knew he was gonna go to the cross. He knew he was hours away from being betrayed, arrested, put on trial, and executed. And so how he spends those last couple hours, they're beautiful, and it reveals a lot about who he is. And so what we've been doing through this series is really looking at John chapter 13, 14, and 15, and really going into the text and asking a question. What does this say about who God is? And then following that up with, and how should that impact how I live my life? And let me just kind of pull back the curtain here for a second. This entire series actually originated from a study I was doing months ago in John chapter 15. And John chapter 15, to me on a personal level, is one of my favorite teachings of Jesus. I come back to it multiple times throughout the year because it's just one of these passages, like no matter how many times you study it, go through it, memorize certain portions, every time I come back into this text, I see something I'd never seen before. I hear something I'd never heard before, and it changes me in a way that I didn't know was possible. So it always draws me back in. And so I was in one of those study places and was so thankful that what God was showing me is something about who He is. And I was really starting to see the connection that God's character, His nature, has everything to do with how I live my life. And if you're like me, sometimes that connection is not very obvious. And we're often like searching, like, what does this mean? How do I apply this to my life? And so this question really emerged from that study, and that's kind of been the foundation of this entire series. And that question simply is this: how does who God is impact the way that I live? And this question, I think, can help us to see how God's Word shapes so much of our life, that His Word isn't stagnant and stale and ancient and somehow in the past, that instead it's living and active, and who He's revealing Himself to be to us today changes our life, right? This question kind of helps us to see that in maybe and hopefully in a brand new way. So we're kind of asking that question each and every week. If you've been with us throughout the series, you know we've been coming back to this question because, you know, as we see these teachings of Jesus, it reveals something about who He is and how it should change and shape our life. And so we're going to do the same thing today as we get into John chapter 15. I'd love it if you'd come along with me in your Bibles. John chapter 15 is where we're going to begin today. And while you're going there, John chapter 15, let me set up just a little bit of the historical context here. It's the last night of Jesus' earthly life before He's crucified, and then 3 days would rise again from the dead. We're going to celebrate that next week and would invite you back to that. But on this last night, he's in an upper room with His disciples, and that's where John chapter 13 really begins to take place. And what we see Him doing in these last moments is provocative, it's revolutionary, it's jaw-dropping. And so I would encourage you, if you've missed any messages in this series, go back and look at some of these teachings that emerge in these last couple chapters of John, because it reveals so much about who He is and what He wants to do in our life. And so as they're in the upper room and there's this teaching that's going on, I'm gonna kind of go to the end of chapter 14 real quick while you're going to chapter 15. I'm gonna finish out in verse 30 of chapter 14 where Jesus says, I don't have much time to talk to you because the ruler of this world approaches. Jesus knows that time of the arrest is coming, so He's like, we need to get up out of here, like dinner is over, boys, we're gonna go. And we know that Jesus is gonna go from the city, He's gonna go outside the city walls to what is known as the Garden of Gethsemane. And that's where He's going to pray. And I want to stop here just for a second, just to make mention that Jesus spent His last final hours pouring into the lives of others, creating stability for His disciples in the midst of really uncertain times. And then He goes to be alone to pray, but He takes His crew with Him. But then He'll go a little bit further off to pray, to connect to God before He was having to endure the cross. I think that's significant, but let's continue. And then we see in verse 31, Jesus says, this ruler of the world, that's the devil, that's the adversary, that's Lucifer, that's Satan. He has no power over me, but I'm going to do what the Father requires of me so that the world will know that I love the Father. Come on, we need to be going. Now that's really significant. That sets up everything that we're going to do. Jesus and His disciples are leaving the upper room and He's telling them straight up, I know what's going to happen. And it's going to be a demonstration of my obedience, which is love. And then the whole world is going to see how obedience and love are so closely intertwined, you could never separate them. And He's like, come on, it's time to go. Now we're in chapter 15, starting in verse 1. Jesus says, I am the true grapevine, and my Father is the gardener. Now, this is a really important teaching, and I want to stop here just for a second and make a mention of a couple things. One is, 2 years ago, we were in a sermon series called I Am Jesus, and we were walking through the I am statements of Jesus. And there's 7 of them, of which this is the very last one. So March 18th, 2018, we were walking through this same passage. We were coming at it from a little bit different angle, but this is one of those bold declarations that Jesus makes about his divinity. Like he says, he uses this phrase, I am, which was a designation for God himself. This is what got Jesus in so much trouble. He equated himself with God, that he and the Father were one, right? We walk through a lot of that language in these chapters in John. Jesus was helping people understand that he and the Father are one. And so this I am statement. But what he says after I am is really fascinating because he uses this language of the grapevine or the true vine. Now, 2 years ago, we did a pretty in-depth study in this. So if you want to learn a little bit more, I would encourage you to go back and watch that message. But I want to highlight something here really quickly, that this language of the vine really was synonymous with the nation of Israel. Like it was one of their primary symbols. It's how they understood their own identity. Like imagine for us in America, like the flag with the stars and stripes, that represents freedom and liberty. And that is a national symbol for our country, right? Now think about this for the nation of Israel was the vine. And that actually comes out of one of the Old Testament books, the book of Numbers in chapter 13. That's the 4th book in the Old Testament, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, and Numbers. In the 13th chapter, the nation of Israel has been delivered from captivity in Egypt. They're walking around in the wilderness. And as they get closer to the promised land, which was Canaan, God had promised them this land. They sent spies ahead to go and check out all the things in the land. And while they're there, they take some of the fruit that they came across. And Numbers chapter 13 records that they found such luxury in the land of Canaan that the grapes, the bushels of grapes were so big and weighed so much that 2 guys had to take a single bushel on a pole and carry it back to the camp. Imagine, that becomes the symbol for the nation. And that language is used by the prophets. It's used by the psalmist, that language of the vine, the grapevine, to describe Israel. And I don't want to go into too much detail because there's a lot of passages that talk about that, but I want to bring one to your attention, and it comes from the prophet Jeremiah. Now, all we're doing is when Jesus says, I am the vine, we're trying to sort of get into the mentality of the disciples. What does that mean to them? When they hear vine, what are they thinking? They would have heard the words of Jeremiah echoing in the background. I want to bring this up. In Jeremiah chapter 2, verse 20, we read, long ago, this is God speaking to the nation, I broke the yoke that oppressed you and tore away the chains of your slavery. But still you said, I will not serve you. And on every hill and under every green tree, you have prostituted yourselves by bowing down to idols. That language of idolatry is so rampant in the Old Testament because people were constantly placing things in their life above God. And God equates that to prostitution. That gives a level of severity to some of that language. And watch this in verse 21. But I was the one. This is my action. I was the one who planted you, choosing a vine of the purest stock, the very best. How did you grow into this corrupt, wild vine? Okay, so this language of the vine, synonymous with the nation of Israel throughout their history, God uses that language to really convict and condemn their behavior. Now, jump back with me to John chapter 15 and let's go into verse 2 because Jesus is going to draw something out here. He says, my Father, who is the vine dresser, he's the gardener, he cuts off every branch of mine that doesn't produce fruit, and he prunes the branches that do bear fruit so they'll produce even more fruit. Now, this is significant because verses 1 and 2 in chapter 15, Jesus is going to expound on in the next 10, 11 verses, but it all really is an exposition of these first 2 verses, and I don't want us to miss the significance of what Jesus is revealing to us. He is the true vine, not the religious establishment, not the nation of Israel, him. Everything is now pointing to him. And the role of the Father is that of the gardener. Now, this is a little bit odd for us because many of us, probably none of us, are actually growing vines to produce grapes. I mean, you wouldn't have to drive too far out of Columbia to hit Rocheport, and you could see actually what this looks like with vines and trellises and grapes growing. And what you will often see at certain seasons throughout the year is men and women going throughout the vineyard, trimming back those branches so that all of the life-giving force from the vine gets produced in the fruit. Now, this is what's really fascinating. Jesus tells us, my Father has two actions. And I want us to consider this. There's two ways, according to Jesus, that the Father makes things grow. Number one is to get rid of the bad shoots that don't produce fruit, to get rid of those branches that are zapping the life force from the good branches. And number two, he prunes the existing plants to produce even more. Now, I want us to stop here just for a second and consider this. God is at work in the life of you and I, according to Jesus, and he's going to help us to understand we are the branches. God is at work to remove that which is zapping the life force from us, and he's also pruning our lives in order that we would produce a little bit more. Now, this is where I think this gets challenging because you and I have a tendency to fight against the pruning that God does in our life. So I want to do here just for a minute something we're not able to do on a Sunday morning, and that is just kind of stop and challenge you with a question. But before I ask you the question, let's just think for a second. If what Jesus says is true, and God's at work right now in our life, where is he working? What is he pruning? What is God trying to do in our life right now to get rid of some of the stuff in our life that is zapping, that is taking away from the work that he's trying to do? Because I'm telling you, like, if you're anything like me, sometimes I get distracted. Sometimes I put my time, my energy, and my resources into things that don't have really any spiritual significance. I can get caught up in them, get distracted, and before I know it, I'm kind of living the same kind of life the nation of Israel was, putting things in front of my relationship to God, which he calls idolatry, which he uses some pretty strong language to talk about. And so for the next couple minutes, I just want to challenge you to consider this question. If you were to kind of stop and take an inventory, where do you see God at work in your life? Where do you see God working in your life right now? Talk about that, or if you're by yourself, just think about that for a minute, and then we'll jump back into chapter 15. All right, so hopefully you've been able to identify maybe just a couple places that you think God may be working. According to Jesus, God is active in your life right now. And I think if we're honest, we may not be able to see it or recognize it. And one of the best things that you could do is, if that was a hard question to consider and maybe you even felt a little self-conscious because you didn't necessarily have something right off the bat, think about this. Can you think of a time in the past where you saw God working really powerfully? And then think, did I know it was happening in the moment? Was I consciously aware of the work he was doing? And does my awareness of his work, what difference would that make in my life? What if I was able to go through that situation knowing God was at work, God was doing something? Now let's apply that to right now. May not be able to see it, not quite sure where it is, maybe feel a little bit guilty about it, but then consider, I know I'm going to trust that he's working right now. Let me encourage you in the midst of everything that's going on right now in your life to stop and consider, maybe just to place your trust in this reality that God is working in your life. And just because you can't see it doesn't mean he's not active and working and doing the very best for you right now. Right? So let's let that carry us into verse 3. Jesus is like he's reassuring his followers once again. Okay, listen, guys, cool down. You've already been pruned and purified. Listen to this. By the message that I've given you. I mean, so the natural reaction is you hear, okay, God the Father is getting rid of branches that aren't producing something and at the same time is pruning my life. That makes me a little nervous, Jesus. He's like, it's all good. The message of the truth, the revelation that has come down from heaven that you have heard is working in your life. Jesus says real specifically, it's like pruning you, it's cleansing, it's purifying you. Think about the gravity of that statement. The word that has come from God, embodied in Jesus, is having an impact on their life that maybe they don't even recognize in the moment. Now, that's kind of foreshadowing for what we're getting into, so hang on with me. Watch this. John chapter 15, verse 4. Remain in me, and I'll remain in you. Now again, remember, verses 1 and 2 are really the thesis statement of this entire passage, and everything else is going to kind of help us to understand it in greater detail. So he's going to explain this a little bit more. Remain in me, and I'm going to remain in you, for a branch cannot produce fruit if it's severed from the vine, and you can't be fruitful unless you remain in me. So Jesus is shifting this narrative from the work of the Father to what our responsibility is, and he uses this word remain, sometimes translated abide. It really means to stay connected to. It is an active action, like we are engaged in staying connected to Jesus, and this is going to be a word repeated over and over and over again in John chapter 15. That should give us a clue. Anytime you're studying through the Bible or you're reading through a passage and you see one word repeated over and over again, it's there for emphasis. Jesus is emphasizing to his disciples, stay connected to me. Now, when you put this in the historical context, I think something really begins to emerge because he's about to go away from them, right? He's already said that. I'm about to leave. I'm going to send you my Spirit. It's going to dwell inside of you. I'm actually going to be closer to you spiritually than we have ever been before. That's actually a good thing, though physically I'm going to be away. And while that's taking place, you need to stay connected to me. Now watch what he says. I am the vine, right? He's restating this. I am the vine. You are the branches. If you remain in me and I remain in you, something beautiful is going to be produced. And he uses this language of fruit again. Apart from me, you're not going to be able to do that. If there's something produced in your life and in my life when we're connected to Jesus, we can't find anywhere else. Nothing in the world can produce in your life and in my life what Jesus can. He's drawing his disciples back to this really profound truth. And then he says, here's the kind of the flip side of it. Anybody who doesn't remain in me is thrown away like a useless branch and withers. And those branches, here's what happens to them. They're gathered into a pile to be burned. But if you remain in me, here's that contrast. If you remain in me, and what does he say? And my words remain in you. you can ask for anything you want and it will be granted to you. Do you get a sense of the weight of this moment? He's like, staying connected to me is everything. I will produce something in your life you couldn't have any other way. And when you stay connected to me, you're going to be able to talk to me. You're going to be able to come to me with your requests, with all the things you need help with. And you can trust and know if you're connected to me, I'm going to answer those. Now, this is the part where you and I need to take a step back and say, Jesus knows what's best for us more than we know what's best for us. And sometimes our prayer is we think we know what's best. And so I'm asking for these things. And our Father in heaven is like, man, if you had that, that would actually destroy you. Because remember the role of the gardener. He's pruning back. He's taking those things away from your life that are actually drawing you away from him. And sometimes I think you and I, we're praying for stuff right now that he knows would not be good for us. And he's pruning it back. And we're fighting it. Wondering, God, what are you doing? Instead of doing what I think Jesus is telling us in really simple and clear terms, we got to stay connected. And hopefully there's a question rising in your mind, how do we do that? According to Jesus, in John chapter 15, how do we stay connected? I want to go back to this verse and I want to show you this. If you remain in me and my words remain in you, there again, right? Verse 3 is talking about the impact that the word has on their life. And then now equates staying connected with his word. And when you stay connected and connected to his word, and he begins to produce a fruit in your life, you'll have a confidence to know. This is what Jesus said. That's how you know you're my true disciples. And this brings glory to God. It's like he's using this imagery of the vine to help them see something like eternal, and yet something I think our human minds can actually in part grasp. He's the vine, we're the branches. He produces a fruit when we stay connected to him. We stay connected to him through what he's revealed to us, which is his word. And when we're doing that, what he produces in our life helps you and I to stand on solid ground. And it helps us to understand this is what God wants us to do. It's actually bringing glory to him. It actually makes him famous when we are connected to his word. Now watch what he adds to this. I've loved you as the Father has loved me. Stay connected to that. Now he's further defining it. Now when we're talking about connection, we're talking about word and we're talking about love. And when you obey my commands, that's how you stay connected. You stay connected through word and you stay connected through love, just as I obey my Father's commands and remain in his love. He's like, listen, this is what I'm doing. Remember how chapter 14 ended? He said, the rule of this world's coming out against me, but I know what's going on. It's going to be a demonstration to the world of my love for the Father seen through obedience. Our love for God seen through obedience. Jesus is our pattern. Now watch what he said. I'm telling you all of this so that you will be filled with my joy. Like the connection that we have to Jesus through his word and through a sacrificial kind of love allows us to experience his joy. And according to Jesus, that kind of joy, watch what the end of verse 11 says, your joy is going to overflow. Now, I want to stop here for a second because I don't necessarily know if you and I believe this. Because if we believe this is who God was, and we believe what he said was true, what impact would that have on our life? I think it would have the most dramatic impact. I think this teaching in its application has the potential to change everything. It has the potential to change those emotions you're having right now in the midst of all the uncertainty in our world. I mean, you may be sitting there honestly asking, how on earth am I supposed to have joy right now? As I heard a friend of mine who just filed for unemployment for the first time in his life. And as April 1st came around, was wondering, I've been out of work for 2 weeks. How am I supposed to pay rent? And how am I supposed to feel joy in the midst of that? Jesus is saying, you stay connected to my word, and you stay connected to this kind of love, you're going to experience joy. Now, here's the question. Do you believe him? Do you really believe that's how we experience joy, is by staying connected to his word and by demonstrating a sacrificial love? Because if we believed it, would you see it in your life? Watch what he says next. This is my commandment. Love each other in the same way I have loved you. That's why I keep using that language of the sacrificial love. And I want to go back really quickly. I want you to look at verse 10. He says, when you obey my commandments, you remain in my love. Okay, natural question. What's the commandment, Jesus? Well, he just told us. Love each other in the same way that I've loved you. This is the kind of love that's willing to sacrifice. It's willing to lay down even your own life. And so let's start putting all this together. What have we seen on display about the character and the heart of who God is? God is active. He is involved in your life right now, whether or not you see it. And if we're not staying connected to him, what's he going to do? I don't want to be removed from the vine. How do I do that? How do I stay connected? And Jesus has said something so profound. I don't want us to miss this, right? I kind of been saving this until the very end. Where is his word in your life right now? I mean, if you're like me, when things get busy, things get out of control, I get stressed, I get worried. You know what tends to take a back seat in my life? It's his word. Now, if you've been at Forum for any number of weeks or months, you have heard me say this before. You and I have it so much better than these early followers of Jesus because we have a complete record. We have these teachings of Jesus from Matthew, these historical accounts from Mark and Luke and John, and then the Apostle Paul and the Apostle Peter. We get to see and hear things so beautifully, even 2,000 years later. And yet, if we've got it so much better, where's the Word of God in our daily life? And what if, according to Jesus, our connection to him is measured by our time, our exposure, and the priority of his word? Now, let me bring in some of the ideas we talked about earlier. If according to Jesus, his word needs to be a priority in staying connected in your life, what are you staying connected to in its place? I mean, how many of us right now with a little bit of extra time at home have started to fashion and make idols out of worry? We've let worry and anxiety take priority over the God of the universe. Listen, this pandemic was not a surprise to God. He still sits on his throne. Listen to me really carefully. We are going to get through this. This will be a story we tell. And we're going to see how you and I are stronger together, that this church, this movement of Jesus was never designed to be a building, that it was going to be a people, and that you could scatter us and you could separate us, and we're still going to be bound together by this love that God has demonstrated through his son Jesus. We are a living witness of that truth that he's revealed to us. Where is it in your life? Maybe it's time to start smashing some idols. Maybe Maybe it's worry over your finances. Maybe it's over the job. Maybe it's the family. Maybe it's your health. Maybe you fashioned an idol over entertainment and you're spending more time than ever trying to distract yourself all the while. And here's what I think, and I'm going to take this dark here just for a second, so bear with me. I really believe that the adversary of God wants you and I out of His Word, disconnected from Him. During a time in our life when we need Him more than ever, let me encourage you, take some of those minutes and those hours that you have and invest them into the Word of God. And maybe you're going to be just like me and the disciples, that sometimes you get into this Word and you don't necessarily get some revelation. You don't necessarily feel any better. You're still dealing with all of the stuff in life. But listen, that doesn't mean He's not working. Just because you can't see it and you can't feel it and you didn't come into some passage and have some insight, that doesn't mean that God isn't using that time that you're interacting with Him to absolutely produce something in your life. Jesus called it joy. And He quantified what kind of joy it was. It was an overflowing kind of joy. So I'll just challenge you on where the Word of God is in your life. And then Jesus said, you want to stay connected to me? How are you showing love to the people around you? Is it a Jesus kind of love? The kind of love that's willing to hurt, to sacrifice? Is it the kind of love that would be willing to even lay down your life? Because so many of us, we're suffering right now because we're selfishly loving. We love people out of what they do for us. We often wonder, what's this going to do for me? If I do this, what am I going to get in return, right? We've grown up thinking everything in an exchange rate of love instead of, let me just give this. Let me just give of myself because I know it's what's best for you, and yeah, it costs me something. That's why I think that term sacrificial love is so overused, because the adversary wants us to think of love as something that we get instead of something that we give. Right? And so I was trying to think, listen, let's take this really big idea and make it something simple. And so I'm going to do something that's going to seem a little bit weird. I'm going to get my phone out. And I usually never bring this up on stage with me. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to show you what I see. Okay, so people have often asked us, where are we filming all of these digital services? Well, we're actually filming them in the middle of our auditorium. Like if I were to look up right now, that's actually dead center in the auditorium. And as they turn the lights up, you can see we've got kind of a production going on here. And this is what I'm looking at. This is how I advance those slides that you're seeing on the screen. And here's the text right here. And let me show you something. The only way any of this is happening is because I'm connected to a power source. And I get disconnected from that power source. Don't be confused. I'm going to be able to use this computer for a little while. And then it's actually going to power off. I'm not going to be able to use it at all. This thing might as well be an overpriced paperweight. But if I go down here and I look at what this was plugged into, see, I think the disciples, they thought in order to be connected to God, you had to physically be right next to Him. Now, if you're a fire marshal, please don't look at what I'm about to show you, because I've plugged that computer in to a power strip. It's also got a light plugged into it that's plugged into an extension cord. And then what we're going to do is we're going to follow this extension cord. I know this is super weird. This is a digital service here at Forum. This is plugged into the wall all the way on the side of the auditorium. Here's the power source. But I was operating all the way over there. Now, here's why I think this is significant. The disciples thought, I got to be right next to Jesus. That's my proximity. And Jesus is like, nope, staying connected to me doesn't mean you're standing right next to me. It means you're connected to my word. It means you're showing the world what sacrificial love looks like. That's how you stay connected to me. And you could be all the way over here. And if you stay connected to me, I'm going to do something in your life that you're not even going to truly comprehend or understand. And so I'm so thankful that God has allowed us to stay connected to Him now, even 2,000 years later, I think more connected than ever before. And so as we close out today's message, I want to leave you with one last and final question. Let's not just study through these sections in John and consider the nature of God and what impact that has on our life. Let's really start to consider when Jesus says stay connected, let's take him seriously. And let's not get buried underneath the guilt and the condemnation of all the things we haven't done. Listen, today's a brand new day that God is giving you. He's inviting you to stay connected through his word and through how you sacrifice your life for the benefit of others. That's how he actually defines love. And so I want to ask you this question. How are you going to stay connected?
From the darkness I called your name. Into darkness your mercy came. You called me out, lifted me up. How great is your love. You bore my weakness, you took my shame, buried my burdens in fields of grace. You called me out, lifted me up. How great is your love. And from the heights of heaven, you stepped down to earth. Innocent perfection, you gave your life for us, and we are amazed. Yes, we stand in awe, for we have been changed by the power of the cross. How great, how great, how great is your love. How great, how great, how great is your love. How great, how great, how great is your love for us. In your kindness, you lead me home. And in your presence, where I belong. And oh, you call me out and lifted me up. How great is your love. From the heights of heaven, you stepped down to earth. Innocent perfection, you gave your life for us, and we are amazed. Yes, we stand in awe, for we have been changed by the power of the cross. How great, how great, how great is your love. How great, how great, how great is your love. How great, how great, how great is your love for us. There has never been anyone like our God. Let's sing this together. And there has never been, and there will never be a God like you, a love so true. There has never been, and there will never be a God like you, a love so true. There has never been, and there will never be a God like you, a love so true. There's never been, and there will never be a God like you, a love so true. How great, how great, how great
tomorrow, April 6th, Elizabeth, my wife, and I will officially have a 1-month-old in our home, which is crazy to think about how fast time flies. But I'll be honest, it's been a unique time to welcome a child into the world. And I think, as difficult as it's been for us, it's been a blessing. Really for us, it's been more time than usual with our son. But I think it's kind of driving our parents crazy. They want to see their grandkids so bad, and maybe you can relate to this, but man, our parents are going crazy. They're texting us every minute of the day, send us photos, send us videos. All families, all sides are kind of competing to get FaceTime time with him when he is awake. And I don't think it's just grandparents during this time. I think it's kind of everybody. It's really revealed to me how deep a desire each one of us has to stay connected with others. I mean, you look at social media, you look at conversations, and people are just desperate in the midst of this crisis to stay connected. And as I think about that and I ponder that, I can't help but grow my thankfulness towards God, who went to great lengths to stay connected to you and I. If you remember, the greatest act of love the world has ever seen was when God sent his one and only Son to die on the cross so you and I could have life eternal and hope beyond anything the world could ever offer. And so as we come to this time of communion and take the bread and take the juice that reminds us of that act, we can grow in our worship and our thankfulness to a God who would go at great lengths to stay connected to you and I. And so as we take this, I ask that you would praise him, thank him for that very truth, and maybe ask him to reveal to you ways that you should continue to stay connected to him. Would you pray with me? God, you are so good. You are so powerfully mighty and holy, and your love is so much greater and stronger than anything the world can ever offer or anything the world has ever seen. God, thank you for sending us your Son so that we can stay connected to you through his sacrifice and through his resurrection and life. God, we worship you, and we hope in every way that we could continue to stay connected to you in the midst of this trying time. God, we thank you for Jesus. It's in his perfect and holy name we pray. Amen.
I love you, Lord. Oh, your mercy never fails me. All my days I've been held in your hand. From the moment that I wake up until I lay my head, oh, I will sing of the goodness of God. So my life you have been faithful, and all my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am able, I'm gonna sing of the goodness of God. I love your voice. You have led me through the fire in darkness. running after me. With my life laid down, surrender now. I give you everything. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. Yes, all my life you have been faithful. And all my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am able, I'm gonna sing of the goodness of God. I'm gonna sing, I'm gonna sing. 'Cause all my life you have been faithful. And all my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am able, oh, I'm gonna sing of the goodness of God. Oh, I'm gonna sing of the goodness of God.
We are so glad that you joined us this morning. If there's anything that we can do to help you connect to God, if you have a prayer request or you have a need that we can help meet, please visit us at forumchristian.org. Have a great week, and we look forward to seeing you soon.